My name is Rob Wallace, I am your life coach and spiritual mentor, and this is Self-Love with Law of Attraction. Hello wonderful people, and welcome to Module 8 of your Self-Love and Law of Attraction course, and today's topic is the empath. Now, this is going to be a subject which many of you are likely to relate to because there has been in the last decade, maybe longer, a growing trend of people who are identifying themselves as being an empath. And folks, I'm going to say this right off the bat. This is a module which is going to ask you to reconsider what being an empath actually means in regards to you loving yourself and realizing that you are love. Now, what am I talking about? Well, let's discuss what an empath is. The common idea is that an empath is a person who identifies with another person's pain. And not just their pain, but an empath is commonly understood as someone who identifies with another person's feelings. And what I want you to do, just for a few seconds, is to think about what that actually means, especially in relation to law of attraction. Because as I've said throughout this entire course, what you think is what comes back to you in physical reality. So if the empath is to be defined as someone who identifies with another person's pain, then I want you to think exactly what that actually means. If you are empathizing with someone and identifying with their pain, then what you are not doing is identifying with another person's solution. If you're identifying with the pain, you're not identifying with the solution, because when you identify with the pain, you're identifying with the past, which is what was discussed in the last module. You're identifying with something that has already been and gone. And not only that, let me just say this, folks, and I say this with absolute love and respect, okay? When you identify with someone's pain, you're not identifying with their pain. You're identifying with your own perception of their pain. You're not actually identifying with someone's pain at all. You're sympathizing with someone through your own concepts of pain. I'm going to give you an analogy of what I'm talking about, just so that it's made clear what I'm talking about in regards to the empath. Say, for example, you're standing at your window and you're watching an elderly person walking slowly down the street. They're likely going from their house to the shop to buy their groceries, and you see them walking back up the street, and you've observed their journey for about 30 minutes, okay? And you've stood there. Then when you're observing that old person, more often than not, a person will end up feeling sorry for that elderly person. And they're feeling sorry for no reason at all. They have no idea where that person's going. They have no idea about who that person is. The only thing they know about that person is they're elderly. And for some strange reason, the person observing the elderly person walking down the street has created some sort of scenario of suffering. They assume that person is frail. They assume that person is not capable of going to do their own daily tasks, when there is every possibility that A, that person is more than capable of doing their own tasks, and B, they may be very well happy doing their own tasks. Now, I want to give you an even further example. I was sitting at the beginning of a nature trail, and an elderly person had come in, and I assumed they were going along to have a daily walk, okay? never thought anything of it, and a jogger went up to that person and asked if they were okay. They seen the person was old, they seen the person was walking slower than normal, and they asked that person if they were okay, if they had anyone looking out for them. And the elderly person turned in disgust at the jogger and said, "Of course I have people looking out for me, but they're not going to do my walking for me." You see, that person was happy. The jogger's perception, the jogger's thoughts created that old person's pain. They had no idea about what that person was feeling. They had no idea who that person was, but yet they assumed that that person was suffering. They made that bold assumption that that person was actually suffering when they knew nothing about the person. So when it comes to being an empath, when it comes to someone assuming the pain of the other person, that pain is created from your own thoughts. It's got nothing to do with the other person. Even if that person's displaying some sort of discomfort, even if that person's talking about their pain, your perception of that pain is only in relation to your own experience. So when you say you're relating to another person's pain, really what you're doing is relating to your own pain, and that's it. Because that person's discussing a situation which you are somewhat familiar with, but you're not resonating with that person's pain. You're resonating with your own ideas of pain. It's coming from inside of you. It's your perception. And let me give an even further analogy. Let's take Africa, for example, because lots of people talk about how there's people starving in the world and there's people in poverty and there's people that have got nothing to eat. Well, I'm not going to say that that's not the case because that would be very immature and foolish. But what's even more detrimental is that, yes, there may be some people in Africa who are not rich, but they still have a roof over their head. And they may be people who've got access to water. And for example, say these people have got access to clean water, but they need to walk a mile with the vases that you see on their heads, which they carry. And for example, they may be farmers who grow their own food. There is the bold assumption that these people are miserable. Now, some of them might be miserable. I'm not discounting that fact. But what I'm trying to say in the broader topic is that there are people living simple lives throughout this planet. You have tribes in Africa, you have the shamans down in the Amazon, and you have places which we regard as third world countries, which are basically places where people chill out. They don't work much, they don't have much money, but they don't have much expenditure. They have a roof, they eat, and they go along their day having lovely walks. They go along the day chilling out on the beach. They go along their day living life peacefully. What I'm trying to say is that although it might appear that someone's not got much, they may be happy with that. And it's not your job to assume that that person is suffering. Now, what's this got to do with self-love? What I'm trying to tell you is that when you assume that someone is suffering, you are assuming the vibration of suffering. You have no idea what that person's feeling, and therefore you are punishing yourself. You are bullying yourself. You are bullying yourself into the vibration of suffering. Do not assume the suffering of another person because we have no idea what that person's going through. We have no idea what they're going through. And this isn't a judgmental thing. I'm not trying to get on your case and say what you're doing is a bad thing. What I'm saying is you're bullying yourself with your own perceptions of empathy. And what I'm trying to say is have some self-respect. Not for the other person, but for yourself. Okay? Have self-respect for yourself and do not align with suffering. Align with solutions. Okay? If a person has come up to you and they're talking about their problems and their woes and their defeats, are you going to align with those problems and sit in perpetual stagnation, talking about those problems and getting nothing solved? Or are you going to align with a solution in order so that person can grow from that state of suffering into a life of fulfillment. You see? So if you are identifying yourself as an empath, think really carefully what you're identifying with. Are you identifying with that person's suffering, or are you going to choose the identification of the solution maker? You see? For example, if you come up to me with a problem, I'm not going to identify with your problem. Okay? I may tell you a story which is similar to your experience, but I'm not going to tell you that story and dwell there. I'm going to tell you about how I came out of that situation and how you can come out of that situation to become a better version of yourself. And when I say a better version of yourself, I mean a happier, more fulfilled version of yourself. So don't identify with suffering. Identify with the solution. Be the solution to a problem. For example, if you've ever been in a study group, or if someone's come up to you asking for an answer to a question, like a maths equation, are you going to identify with how you both cannot answer that question and sit there forever dwelling on how you can't answer it? Or are you going to get your heads together and align with how to find the solution? Are you going to identify with being the solution to the equation instead of identifying with how you can't do it? There's a difference, you see? Be the solution to the problem, okay? Don't identify with a problem and just sit there in the state of the problem. Identify with the solution to the problem, okay? And so what I want to really drive home in this module is I don't want you to think that I'm knocking or I'm devaluing empathy. What I'm trying to say is that if you go to that place of identifying with suffering, all you're going to create for yourself is more suffering. And what this whole course is about you identifying with love. That is identifying with your highest potential. Because get this, folks, when you identify with your highest potential, then that becomes the solution to all other problems which you're faced with, even if it's someone else's problem. Because your answer for their problem is going to be the same answer I'm giving to you. Realize your highest potential. You see, by the fact that you've realized who you are, you can then pass on that gift to other people, which will rocket them out of that state of suffering into a state of fulfillment and happiness and health and wealth and love. And so today's exercise is this. And again, I want you to do what I always ask you to do, is create 2 columns. And I want you to think of someone that you know in your social circle who you assume is suffering, okay? And on the left-hand page, I want you to write down, how do you identify with that suffering? So you're going to write down on the left-hand side how you identify with a person's suffering through the identification of an empath. So as an empath, how do you identify with that suffering? And then on the right-hand side of the page, for all the 10 things which you've listed in regards to how you identify with that person, I want you to come up with a solution. For all the 10 things that you've listed on how you identify with the person suffering, I want you to write a productive solution. Okay? So for example, if you identify with a person being anxious, what's the solution? And you know what, folks? I have a whole module on anxiety, for example, on how to find a solution to the problem, okay? And that's what I want you to do for everything you list. Come up with a productive solution to the problem. And if you can't find a solution, don't beat yourself up, but allow this challenge to make you go and research for solutions. Don't just sit there and think. Go and research. Go and find out information about that problem and how it's solved, especially through law of attraction, because that's why you're here. You've came here to learn about self-love through the principles of law of attraction, okay? I want you to try your best with those 10 things which you've identified with as an empath, and then to come up with solutions. And whatever solution you come up with, even if it's just one, I want you to start identifying with that solution in regards to that person. Okay? I want you no longer to identify with the problem, but to identify with the solution. And when you start identifying with the solution, you'll find that you'll start talking about that solution to the person more than you'll talk about the problem. And folks, guess how helpful you're going to be to that person when you start talking about solutions? You're going to change their life when you start talking about solutions, okay? You're not going to change your life by talking about the problem. You're going to change their life by talking to them about solutions, okay? So, this concludes Module 8. And folks, we're sailing just fine through the sea of the moment of self-love. And I'll see you in Module 9, folks. Have a wonderful and extraordinary day. May your day be full of love, and I'll see you in the next module. Have a great day. God bless you, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye.